we call it in the addiction field, like hitting your bottom, right? Some people's bottoms are different. My bottom was putting a gun in my mouth and pulling the trigger, right? Other individuals' bottoms could be right up at work. What we don't want is make that bottom any kind of lower.
Consequences of untreated mental health, PTSD, addiction, compounded by trauma experienced on the job. In this case, police work. Today, we are joined by Brian Sabo, the Regional Director of Partnership at STR Behavioral Health. But before we get started, I want to warn, today's discussion topics are sensitive in nature and not suitable to all. Brian, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I am Robert Asensio, and next to me, I have my co-host, retired police chief and military historian, David Magnuson. How are you, David?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Oh, man, it's good. It's good.
Good.
So let's get right into it. Brian, you have a very, very impressive story, a story that takes you from the lows to helping fellow police officers, veterans, people who are struggling with untreated mental health. Tell us a little bit about your background and your untreated mental health.
Sure. My background, I was a police officer in my early to mid 20s back in the 90s. I always suffered from some kind of, untreated depression. Wasn't officially diagnosed with it, but I always had some kind of depression, high anxiety, never treated once again. That escalated over a period of time, especially when I was a police officer, which led to the addiction to alcohol.
Talk a little bit about what you're doing at STR. What's your function at STR Behavioral Health?
Sure. So I'm my title is I'm the Regional Director of Clinical Partnerships. And basically my job is I navigate first responders, veterans, and anybody really into treatment for mental health and addictions.
And tell us a little bit about STR Behavioral Health.
Sure. So STR Behavioral Health, here in the Lehigh Valley, I work for an inpatient facility called Silver Pines Treatment Center. It's a duly licensed inpatient facility located in Montaho City. We are duly licensed for primary mental health or primary substance use disorder. And I also work for an outpatient called Steps to Recovery Lehigh Valley, which helps patients and clients with the same, with addictions and mental health.
And you're working with police officers and veterans as well, right?
I am. Yes, we have a first responder and veteran track at our inpatient at Silver Pines, and we are currently working on getting a first responder track and veteran track here at the outpatient at STR Lehigh Valley. And
you have offices in other parts of the country, right?
Yes, Florida, down south, out west as well. Yep.
No, it seems to me that this story is fascinating. But it's like a Quentin Tarantino movie. We're starting at the end.
Yeah.
And what we're missing is how Brian got to where he is, because it's like the Phoenix.
To set it up here, to frame it up for the audience. You started in police work, Allentown Police Department, Allentown, Pennsylvania, in 1997, I believe.
Yes.
And then you spent some time on the road. So tell us about your work in police work, briefly.
Sure. So real brief, I was a Center City unit in Center City, Allentown, and I was car 3. So meaning I went to all the hot calls. So it was the calls where we had a lot of shootings back then, a lot of gang activity, a lot of violence. And what I wasn't prepared for, and no one's fault, in my 20s being, such a young man, I wasn't prepared to seeing what society is really like regarding police work. So in other words, seeing the death, seeing how people live, getting spit in your face, constantly being ridiculed as a police officer. And, you move forward to 9/11, 9/11 was the worst tragedy on U.S. soil ever. They took volunteers, I was the first one to raise my hand because I was not married at the time. And, I didn't know what to expect, first responders, veterans, cops, firefighters, or we run into the action, right? Sometimes I felt as though I was prepared. So I remember driving to New York City, cloudy day. It was 2 days after 9/11, and just seeing the plumes of smoke coming up from the towers. And, I felt fear, right? Would never admit it, but I felt fear. And I thought we're going to go there, find some terrorists, I know what to expect, and then the big reality shock to me was really seeing, like, we went there to guard bodegas and stores from being looted. And I didn't even know that was a thing. And it just really blew my mind that it was happening. U.S. citizens, were doing this stuff. And that's why we're here, to protect stores. And, and seeing all the death, the destruction, like getting in fights all the time, really messed with my mental health. And, we don't want to talk about it because, we're Class A personality. I would never want to appear weak, wanted to trust my fellow officers. So I never said anything. I just sucked it up like I did my whole life.
Yeah, you don't take time enough to process, right? What's going on. And then if you do process it, who else wants to process it with you? Because you may come forward and say, this, what I'm going through here, this is not what I signed up for. This is off the chain. And others may feel the same thing, but they're not coming forward. They're not breaking that ice.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sort of like on an island to yourself. And while that's happening, you have to make that assumption that it's not getting better on its own.
And trusting the administration. Did they offer help? Absolutely they did, but then you trust the administration, they're going to do the right thing and not throw you underneath the bus. I heard stories. I don't know what to do. So I was brought up, pain doesn't hurt, suck it up, buttercup type deal. And that's exactly what I did. And I suffered for it.
Yeah. And let's go back to ground zero, right? Mm-hmm. So you were about a mile from ground zero, patrolling, protecting the community, freeing up the assets so they can be deployed down to the local assets to the affected zone.
Yep.
So what were the sights and sounds like, and how did they impact you?
Terrible. It was, I can remember it vividly. You smelled, and I'm not even sure how to describe it, destruction. You smell death. The visual is just people confused, dust all over the place. It looked like a black and white movie. And that was kind of my frame of mind, just being in a black and white movie. It was so surreal. It's very difficult for me personally to process it.
Let's talk a little bit about what kind of struggles you were dealing with personally.
Sure. So I had a lot of untreated trauma when I was an adolescent, right? Which continued to grow, as I mentioned earlier. And, the stuff that we see on the streets, the fighting with individuals, the gang members, all that. And what that led me to is to drink my problems away. I kind of I self-medicated with alcohol because I didn't know how to deal with it in my head. So I used to get drunk every night, never on duty, went home, got drunk, forgot about it, and did it the next day. And that continued for a number of years.
But you're saying you're doing it every day afterwards, never on duty. Yep. You're coming home. What is it doing? How is it numbing you? What is it doing for you?
That's a great question. So it may be difficult to explain, but it made me temporarily forget about what happened the day of, or the past traumas and situations I've been as a police. Like at nights, I remember laying in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind would keep going and going and going. So I drank enough to pass out, never really slept. So it helped me forget temporarily and sleep.
But did you think while that was going on, maybe by the second or third time that happened, that this is not a good road to go down? This can't sustain? Or did you just feel that, the numbing feels good to me?
That was my solution at the time.
Okay.
That was my solution because I didn't know anything else. I wasn't I didn't get help, wasn't offered help. So I diagnosed myself.
Did you lose the hope that we have in society and just said, fuck it?
I did. And that's exactly how to sum it up, is fuck it. It was terrible. I didn't realize the everyday, how do I explain this? How people lived every day and how people treat cops. I thought, hey, I'm going to help a lot of people on a police. That was my main goal, right? I could probably count on one hand over a number of years I was a police officer. I actually got to help somebody individually, the constant, fighting with guys, the foot chases, the getting spit on, and not feeling as though you can do anything about it. Just wear and tear. You get the fucking real fast.
And then that kind of leads to the high risk behavior, right?
You would think, and I would add another caveat. Whether it's violent related or not, or you're running across victims, you're always around people that are at their saddest.
Yep.
Not their happiest, their saddest. Where somebody's in a car accident, you got family coming out there, and somebody's deceased, or a gunshot victim, which I think you and I have seen that way more than we ever want to.
For sure.
And that is what it is. But here comes family. Here comes family crying. Here comes mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers coming to a scene. And if you think you can disassociate from that and not let it bother you, I would say that you're not human.
Dehumanizing.
That's I
dehumanized myself. Like you guys saw bodies, I saw bodies. It was like seeing like a branch laying on the ground after it got struck by lightning.
So you obviously get involved in, exhibit some risky behavior, high risk behavior. You do some things on the job. You're forced to leave the job, right? Forced to leave police work. You get in trouble with the law. You mentioned to us that you had some DUIs. Tell us a little bit about that period.
Being a cop was my identity, right? So pretty much overnight, I lost my identity, which fueled my alcoholism. Now at this point, like I'm drinking from the time I wake up, almost to the time I go to bed, for another 12, 15 years, however long it's been. It's funny. People always ask me, like, what was that feeling like, right? It's like feeling alone in a crowded room. That's the way to describe it. Like, I was in crowded rooms. I had a lot of friends. I always felt alone. On the outside, I was groomed, right? Just like my house. The outside of my house, grass cut, bushes, flowers, look beautiful. Inside my house, a hot mess. Laundry, dirty dishes. Inside my head, the same thing. A whole hot mess. But I held it together for as long as I can until I couldn't handle anymore. And you get to that point. I get upset here. You get to that point where you don't want to live and you don't want to die.
You said you felt you lost your identity.
Yes.
And that happens to a lot of retirees when they leave the job. And as such, that's why there is a high level of suicides with law enforcement in the retirement age.
Yeah.
So losing the identity, that sort of was, that was spot on. Fully understand, what that means and where you're going to. But I want to hear more about what led up to a, as we say, what would have been a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
So for anybody out there that's struggling, I want you to share with them what happens when you leave police work. Like, how do you say you felt alone, you felt isolated, you lost your identity, you were drinking excessively, you were still dealing with your struggles. What was the lowest point?
I think when I came to the realization, and this, mind you, this wasn't like the next day, this is over a long period of time, like I didn't feel important anymore. I had a couple I should have got probably 500 DUIs in my life, right? I always got lucky. And I thank the good Lord above that I never killed anybody or myself. Right at the end, I had back-to-back DUIs, right? And I didn't give a shit. I had back-to-back DUIs. I had a lot of financial bad situations I put myself in. I didn't give a shit. I want the pain to go away. And the best way I thought at the time was to take my life. So I ended up getting drunk the one night, took some pills for a little bit, liquid courage, they call it, right? I put a gun in my mouth, I pulled the trigger and the gun jammed and I broke down. I cried like a baby. For the first time in my life, I cried like a baby. And all that inner trauma, stress, anxiety all came out alone in my car up in the Pocono Mountains here in Pennsylvania. I didn't die for a reason. And I think part of that reason is why I'm talking today on this subject. It's important. It's important to get the word out. I share my story freely, like other gentlemen do, who've been through similar situations, because it's important for other people to hear. Right before this broadcast, I was talking about a first responder who's going through very similar things I went through 20 plus years ago. He's actively working, and the best thing for we to do is share these stories, because it's okay. It's okay to have a problem, right? It's okay to have some mental health. It's treatable, not with alcohol, and not with isolating yourself, which I did my entire life.
At the time, at that very moment, or leading up to that very moment,
Mm.
where you pull that trigger,
Mhm.
did you think of loved ones or anything, what it's going to do to them? Or was you, well, you're nodding, so I'm thinking that happened. What were your thoughts then?
So I wasn't married at the time, but I thought about my nieces and my nephews, and this is the crazy part, because being first responders, like we always run to the fight, right? We always care about everybody else but ourselves. I wrote very brief letters in my car, and I actually, because I knew that was state police territory up in the Poconos, I wrote a letter to the officer apologizing for what he was about to find. Pretty much my head blown off, right? To being clear and cut. But it didn't stop me. Like I said, that pain got so great that I pulled the trigger, and obviously didn't go off. But yeah, it's just hard to describe. It's just tremendously hard, but yeah.
Do you struggle with these suicide ideations even to this day?
I do. It goes through my mind. But with the help of a lot of therapy, support groups I attend locally here that are only attended by first responders and veterans, we have a toolbox, right? We have a toolbox. And if I'm feeling a certain kind of way, I'll pull those tools out of the toolbox, meaning mental exercises, breathing exercises, or more importantly, I pick up the 600-pound phone and I reach out to a buddy, a comrade who has been through it, and they will talk me off the ledge. And I do that weekly, to say the least, to this day.
The real reason for not committing suicide is because you always know how swell life again is after the hell is over.
Mm.
That was written by Ernest Hemingway, who ended up committing suicide a year or two after writing that.
Yeah.
So I understand the struggle is never over. It's just, how do you channel it into the right ways? How do you reach out? How do you stay away from the alcohol? And, or as you say, the false liquid courage, things like that. There's lessons to be learned for sure.
What's amazing is that, law enforcement veterans, we're usually around a lot of firearms. We see the consequences of the firearm, and we know how easy it is. And I guess that's why it becomes a weapon of choice for taking our lives, right?
Yeah.
Thank God you didn't take your life. Thank God you're still here. Thank God you're still helping. So let's shift the conversation a little bit to what you're doing now and how you're helping people, and give some advice to those that are out there are struggling, that can use it, right? That haven't had the realization, the epiphany, oh man, I'm in trouble. I need help.
I'll tell you this briefly. So I've seen therapists over the years, right? I was never fully honest with them because I know they didn't go through or seen or did the things that I've done, right? To me, when we talk to a peer who's been through it, they understand where we're coming from.
And you can't bullshit them, right? You can't bullshit them.
You can't bullshit a bullshitter, right? You cannot, And I surround myself now with friends who will call me out on my shit when I'm not acting right? They'll tell me things I don't want to hear, and I love them for it. And I do the same to them. There's a saying, you have to surrender to win, right? And surrender is not in our vocabulary at all. But when it comes to mental health and or addiction or both, we have to surrender to win. And that's what I did. And I did that by reaching out to, the stigma is slowly lifting too, regarding mental health and addiction, right? Still very prominent, especially when it comes to first responders, any public official.
And we can all agree that stigma is the biggest obstacle to seeking help.
Yep.
How do you overcome that stigma? Because there's consequences, right? Yep. If you were on the job and you had said to your staff, right, your supervisors, I have a drinking problem, I'm off the rails, I'm thinking about killing myself, you wouldn't pull off the line.
Yeah.
But the consequences of not seeking help can be drastic and can be life-ending. But how do you overcome that stigma? What words can you provide those that will listen or hear or see this video to overcome that?
I think it's just what I said before. You got to surrender to win, and trust, especially, make no mistake. It's very difficult calling somebody who you don't know and asking for some kind of help, right? Anything. So, it's that surrender to win. When people get to their, like, we call it in the addiction field, like hitting your bottom, right? Some people's bottoms are different. My bottom was putting a gun in my mouth and pulling the trigger, right? Other individuals' bottoms could be right up at work. What we don't want is make that bottom any kind of lower. So, I think, can I answer your question? I'm sorry, I'm getting wordy here. To make support groups or help available to officers, confidential wise, because that trust thing, I don't think it'll ever go away. It's tough for me to, it would trust me to go to a command unit and say, hey, I need help. That's kind of difficult. We kind of structure it up here where you can reach out to a peer and not go through your command units. And we can help you up that way. But I think surrender to win. And by surrendering, just pick up that phone and make a call. That's where it leads you.
And if that stigma can be lifted, or at least the knowledge imparted to people, that the quicker you jump on this, first of all, the easier it will be to help out, and the better off you'll be and those around you. That may go a long way, but it takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage to get moving, but it's like anything else. I think once you get moving in a lot of these things that you overcome, you always find people say, well, why didn't I do this before?
Yeah. So, Brian, we have 3 minutes left, and I want to get to two questions here. One, how's life now?
Life is good.
You married?
I am married now. Thank you. I have a beautiful wife, supportive. There's another thing. I never thought I'd be married my entire life. I never thought I'd own another home. My life has changed 180. I speak publicly about my struggles, and let's face it, my life is not a highlight reel. You know what I mean? A lot of downs, but more importantly, there's a whole bunch of ups. And what keeps me driving, like keeps me active every single day, like even doing this podcast with you gentlemen, like getting the word out, like helping people. The most selfless thing we can do as humans, especially first responders, in my opinion, is help another first responder who's struggling.
So for anybody out there that's struggling, that needs help, immediate help, the suicide hotline, the National Suicide Hotline is 988. Brian, tell us how anybody can contact STR Behavioral Health if they need to get a hold of you guys.
Yeah. Listen, you can contact me directly. My phone number is 484-225-2899. And we have an admissions phone number, which is 888-755-7227. And everybody, like at our admissions department, STR Behavioral Health, they've been through the ringer as well. So they're peer support. And I can promise you this, you make that phone call, you will be treated with respect. You won't be judged, and you'll be treated with love and hope. And that's what we all need. A little bit of love and a little bit of hope, which goes a long way.
That's right, brother. Any closing thoughts, sir?
You mentioned something last time we spoke, and it holds a lot of water in anything. Slow but steady.
Yes, right? That's what it is.
Slow but steady.
That's what it is. Like, I've been in recovery from alcohol for over 12 years. And it wasn't overnight, and it's work every single day. So I make recovery meetings 3 to 5 days a week. I keep in constant contact daily with my fellow brothers from the Thin Blue Line, who are my support group. And I'm a very spiritual person. I have a relationship with my higher power. And it's not an overnight fix. It's a lifelong commitment, but it's worth it.
We've come to the end of another Vets and Badges. You can find us on all podcast platforms under Vets and Badges, or the YouTube channel Vets and Badges, or our website VetsAndBadges.com. If you don't get it, it's Vets and Badges. To the community news team, we can't thank you enough. Michael, Grant Miller, our producer behind the scene, Gerald, and to you, the audience, thank you.